Hey, folks. Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to a very special Watchman Newscast live stream. It's nearly 7 o'clock Texas time, 8 o'clock on the East Coast. Usually we come to you a few hours earlier, but we had to wait, and you know why. The massive, and I don't say this lightly, historic, certainly potentially historic press conference that we just witnessed between President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House. And folks, where to begin? Okay, we've got a lot to unpack here live. Welcome to everyone who's joining us from around the world. Number one, Gaza. And we've said all along that Donald Trump is an outside-the-box thinker. We saw it during his first term, the Abraham Accords. Certainly, we're seeing it now. The big headline here, we won't bury the lead. Donald Trump declared that he wants the U.S. to take over control of Gaza and essentially turn it into an economic zone, it seems. Take charge of the rebuilding there. We're going to break it down more, what this all means. Take charge of the rebuilding there and create a new Gaza. He called it, or he said it could be like a Riviera on the Mediterranean. And I think he's right. I mean, incredible climate, beautiful, beautiful coastal strip. Well, it could be, not under Hamas rule, of course, but Trump envisions this beautiful coastal strip, waterfront property on the Mediterranean with an incredible climate. So that's his vision. I get it. He's a big thinker, an outside-the-box thinker. This man's a visionary. And look, he was a real estate developer. He sees potential there. We've got a lot to talk about there. And finally, of solving the problem, the Gaza problem. It's been a terror hornet's nest for decades. And look, folks, in a biblical sense, if you want to go back century upon century, 3,000 years ago, Gaza was home to, guess who? The Philistines, who were the ultimate thorn in Israel's side in biblical times. So we want to talk about this Gaza plan. And in the run-up, in the past week or two, Trump has said, look, we should relocate Gazans, empty out the 1.7, 1.8 million Palestinians living there. And he expanded on that in a major way today. We're going to break it down, but relocate them to places like Jordan, Egypt, other Muslim nations. He was kind of laying the groundwork. That was the prelude to the big announcement at the press conference after his meeting with Bibi, where he said, look, actually, the United States, we'd like to take it over. Now, right away, criticism is this nation building, which Trump has been a big, obviously vocal opponent of. I want to break that down as well. The distinction. Secondly, okay, start with Gaza. Secondly, Iran. Very clear, blunt language on Iran. Trump said unequivocally, Iran cannot develop nuclear weapons. And if they try to develop nuclear weapons, it's not going to end well for them. He was very clear. And he said that as he was standing right next to the Prime Minister of Israel. So no daylight. The last 4 years under Biden were all about daylight between Israel and the U.S., and that's a bad thing. And Bibi referenced that today. Daylight meaning there's distance between Israel and the United States. And our enemies, our shared enemies, are quite literally taking notes. And they say, aha, there is a schism between the U.S. and Israel that we can take advantage of. It empowers and emboldens our shared enemies when they see friction and perceive distance between Israel and the United States. Trump said, no, we're not going to have that. Bibi said the same. But with Iran, Trump earlier today announced the, quote, maximum pressure campaign is going to begin once again. And we saw that during his first term. It means an economic tightening of the noose around the Iranian regime's neck, not the Iranian people, who are the main victims of this regime. And Trump made that clear. It's the regime that is the problem. And Trump is saying, look, the maximum pressure campaign, sanctions, massive economic pressure. He's saying, we're going to give that a chance. And there's probably a window there. And just in that press conference after that meeting, Bibi looked happy. So the meeting must have went well behind closed doors. And I'm sure it went something like Trump saying, look, let's try to solve the Iran nuclear problem through the maximum pressure campaign. Let's see. Iran's already so weakened, like we've been discussing here in the live stream for months now. Look, the ring of fire, Hamas, Hezbollah, Assad gone, that's smashed. Iran's air defenses have been destroyed. They're a sitting duck for a strike against their nuclear sites, essentially, with them so weakened and vulnerable right now. Trump is saying, you know what? We've got all the leverage. And Trump, God bless him, knows he has leverage, and he's not afraid to use it. He's been doing it again and again over the past 16 days since he took office. I bring you Canada, Mexico, Panama, and Colombia. But he's saying, look, we've got all the leverage. Iran they're vulnerable. And he said today, look, they're strong. They're not weak. Well, I think some of that's semantics because he's a smart deal maker. He knows what he's doing. They've got their backs against the wall. Trump knows that. So he's saying, look, if we apply maximum pressure, and again, tighten the noose economically, the prayer would be that the Iranian regime would cave and abandon their decades-long pursuit of a nuclear weapon. I find it unlikely, and I'll discuss why in a minute. I think the ultimate outcome will be military action. No, but to Trump's credit, he's trying everything he can to avoid military action. He truly is a man of peace. And you can see it in the way he talked about Gaza today. He said, no more bloodshed there. It's been a cauldron of hatred, terror, and extremism for decades. Let's cast a new vision there and just rebuild it and start fresh. Imagine that, a solution, real leadership. But he's giving Iran every chance because he is a man of peace. And he said, I want to be a peacemaker. I don't want to be starting wars. I want to make the world a better place. Again, imagine that. So he's giving Iran a chance. If Iran, as I suspect, does not take this golden opportunity and continues with the nuclear madness and that road to oblivion, then Trump was very clear. The nuclear sites will be destroyed. And read between the lines, folks, that would lead very likely to regime change in Iran. And I said Bibi looked pretty happy. Good. I'm sure behind closed doors during their meeting, and they had a little press junket in the Oval Office. You may have seen they were sitting side by side in front of a roaring fireplace in the Oval Office earlier this afternoon. Then they went behind closed doors and they met for over an hour. They came out after the meeting and they obviously had a press conference, took questions from the assembled Israeli and American press. Now they're off to dinner together, apparently, they and their teams. And, you know, I've interviewed President Trump twice. I've interviewed Benjamin Netanyahu. I've spent a lot of time with Ron Dermer, who is Bibi's top advisor. And Zaki Hanegbi was also there. I've interviewed him. So it's pretty interesting to see that group of people. And in talking to them over the years, I think I get a pretty good picture, a good inkling of how they tick. But Trump is saying, I'm sure he told, why did Bibi look pleased? Because I'm sure, well, number one, the Gaza madness, that problem might be off his hands eventually. More on that in a second. But I'm sure Trump said, hey, if they don't give in to the maximum pressure campaign, if Iran doesn't want to play ball, we're going to strike. And perhaps, I have no idea. I wish I was a fly on the wall in that meeting, but I'm sure Trump said, look, we're going to give it a try here with them. One last go to see if we can avoid war and striking Iran. And if they don't, Trump's the deal maker. If they don't play ball, then either Israel, Trump probably told Bibi, you've got the green light, or Trump said, we'll do it with you. In the very least, you've got the green light. And oh, by the way, today, Trump just announced that thousands of 1,000-pound bombs will be sent from the U.S. to Israel. I wonder why. Those sound like the kind of bombs that would be used to strike at underground nuclear weapons facilities that are embedded deeply and buried and fortified deeply underground. It's just what the doctor ordered for a massive Israeli assault on Iran's nuclear facilities, which again, I believe it's coming if the maximum pressure economic sanctions campaign fails. It wouldn't fail for any lack of effort by the United States, certainly, and by President Trump and his administration. The only reason it would quote unquote fail is if the Iranian regime rejects it and continues with their, which I believe is ultimately a suicidal drive for nuclear weapons. And we talk about death warrants. You might say, huh? If you've been watching us for a while, you know what I'm getting at here. And by the way, if you have been watching us for a while, this is your first time, you like what you're hearing, current events, breaking news, mainly from the Middle East and Israel, how it affects you, no matter where you live, and from an unapologetically biblical perspective, make sure to subscribe and click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. We're coming to you most weekdays and sometimes on the weekends, depending on the news cycle. And when it comes to the Middle East, it's usually not a slow news cycle, needless to say, but make sure to subscribe. We just passed 1 million subscribers a short time ago, and we're looking to build even more this year as encouraging. Imagine that. Encouraging things are happening in the world's most volatile and chaotic region, the Middle East. For the first time in a long time, evil is on the run. Evil is being put to flight, especially in the Middle East. I'm going to share more on that in a few minutes as well. But death warrants, you might say, wow, what a pleasant topic on a Tuesday night. But in all seriousness, on October 7th, 2023, this is very simple. On October 7th, 2023, in what Hamas thought was its crowning achievement, its crowning glory, the invasion of southern Israel, the slaughter of 1,200 Israeli men, women, and children, taking hundreds of hostages back to the bowels of hell in Gaza. Their crowning achievement. And yet, obviously, they signed their own death warrant. Hamas signed its own death warrant on that day. Isn't that something? Someone wrote earlier on X, Yahya Sinwar, the jug-eared former leader of Hamas, is turning in his grave because his decision to invade Israel on October 7th led to the complete collapse of Hamas, the demise of its entire leadership. Yes, there still are Hamas jihadis in Gaza, no doubt, but they are defanged from what they were, certainly. No longer an existential threat to Israel. Gaza is essentially leveled. They brought it upon themselves. Hezbollah's been smashed. Iran's air defenses have been destroyed. This is all, and now Gaza may be under U.S. control eventually and may be emptied of Palestinians, including Hamas. All of these are the dominoes that came from October 7th. I mean, in the span of 16 months, all of this has happened. Iran's ring of fire has collapsed. Assad gone in Syria. I don't think any of this happens without, as obviously, October 7th, demonic, epitome of evil, horrific, but strange as it is, out of the darkness and evil of that day, perhaps in the long run, some good could come out of those horrific ashes. And they signed their death warrant, did Hamas, on that day. And one day later, by the way, October 8th, 2023, when Hezbollah, key point here, unilaterally began firing rockets, missiles, and drones at Israel without provocation. And October 7th, without provocation, Hamas invaded and attacked Israel. Hezbollah also signed its death warrant. Back to back. Little did they know. Folks, they were riding high. Israel was on its heels. It was stunned. It was shook. And now Hamas and Hezbollah are a shell of their former selves. And Assad in Syria, the real linchpin of the entire ring of fire, the Iranian axis, is gone, living in exile in Moscow. And the Houthis are next on the list. Trump mentioned them today, and I don't know how long for this world the Houthis' leadership in particular is. The new sheriff in town in Washington, D.C. has had, I would say these are the most monumental 16 days, first 16 days of any presidency in U.S. history. Whether you like it or you dislike it, by the way. And I happen to love it. It's been glorious as an American who loves my country. Even if you don't like Donald Trump, you got to admit, these 16 days have been extremely consequential. The man is a machine. I don't know if he sleeps. He's 78 years old. He's got the energy of an 18-year-old. It's incredible to see. And he's got vision, and he's got a great team around him, and he's bold, he's got a backbone, and he dares to think outside the box. So we got to talk a little bit more about Gaza. Iran, the clock is ticking. Let's say that, folks. the clock is ticking. I've said all along over the past few months, when Donald Trump won practically 3 months ago to the day, November 5th, I said, this will be the year of reckoning for Iran's nuclear program. That's what this means for the Middle East. This will be the year of reckoning. Because Trump is in office. Now, look, if he wasn't in office, Israel still would have done what it needed to do, even if there was a Harris-Waltz regime, God forbid, in the White House. Israel would have still done what it needed to do. But the big difference was it would have been condemned and harangued and, the pressure and maybe even sanctioned, I don't say that lightly, by the Harris-Waltz regime. It would have been a nightmare. Israel would have been going against the grain completely. But it still would have struck Iran's nuclear facilities. But it would have been tough in a diplomatic sense. There would have been diplomatic repercussions. Harris and Waltz would have wailed and gnashed their teeth. And everyone watching this with a shred of common sense knows that. But once Trump won, I said, here we go. We saw Trump's first term with Iran, maximum pressure. And again, he's picking that strategy up once again, picking up where he left off. But I said, here we go. Trump's going to greenlight. Bibi doesn't have to worry now. Trump will greenlight Bibi. Do what you got to do. Do what you need to do. Just let me try the maximum pressure campaign first. Let's see if we can squeeze concessions out of the Iranian regime. And they blink, so to speak. And they abandon the nuclear program. And short of that, Bibi, do what you need to do. But I said, this is the year of reckoning. Now Bibi, he's got the wind at his back already in that, as we've discussed, Hamas, Hezbollah smashed, Assad gone, the Houthis about to be smashed, and they're half smashed right now. Israel's hit them pretty hard over the past few months. The Iraqi militias, Iran-backed, also kind of backing off and being more quiet, needless to say. And then Israel destroyed Iran's air defenses on October 26th. So Bibi already had all the momentum in the world. And then Trump, a true friend of Israel, takes office, who's also committed to preventing a nuclear Iran by any means necessary. Add it all up, ladies and gentlemen, and you have the year of reckoning, 2025, for Iran's nuclear program. I believe, I'm not a date setter, but I don't think it's a stretch to say that by the end of this year, we're going to know one of two things. We're going to know either that, okay, Iran broke out, they're a nuclear power. And we've heard reporting just this morning that Iran now, they know how vulnerable they are. Trump and Bibi together, this is Iran's worst nightmare, folks. The scenes you just saw at the White House. The Ayatollahs will not sleep well tonight, nor should they. But Iran is looking at this and saying, maybe we break out fast. And the reporting this morning said exactly that Iran now is looking for shortcuts to shorten the amount of time that it needs to acquire the bomb. And remember, they have a robust ballistic missile program, the largest ballistic missile program in the entire Middle East. And their ultimate dream is to mount an intercontinental ballistic missile, an ICBM, with a nuclear warhead. Now, ICBMs do exactly what their name says. They're designed to travel across continents and across oceans. And you only develop ICBMs for one reason, and for one reason only, to mount them with a nuclear warhead. Folks, those ICBMs are not for Israel. They're not for Saudi Arabia. They're not even for Europe. Those ICBMs are for the country that Iran considers the great Satan. That would be the United States. Remember, in their calculus, their ideology, their eschatology, Israel is only the little Satan. It's America that is the ultimate target, the great Satan. Again, their words, not mine. And Trump alluded to that today. And he was asked about the Iranian plots to assassinate him. And he said, if they do it, they'll be wiped off the map. I'm paraphrasing, but he said, I've left orders. If I'm harmed by Iran or an Iranian assassin, God forbid, my orders are destroy them. Again, let's just say this is not Joe Biden speaking. It's a new sheriff in town. I'll magnify that 1,000-fold. But we will know. Okay, Does Iran succeed in essentially for them in what is a race against the clock, right? Because after the press conference today, they're probably really saying, "Oh man, if we're going to dig in our heels and say no, we're not giving up our nuclear program. We are fully committed to completing this decades-long project of developing the bomb, and we need to do it fast." Follow the North Korea model, right? Essentially, North Korea, Iran's close ally, by the way, who certainly Iran is getting tips and pointers from on the nuclear front, because Iran and North Korea are charter members of what I call the Gathering Storm Coalition: China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. A lot of people are talking about regime change in North Korea. And then Kim Jong-un started firing or test firing nuclear weapons and testing nukes. And all of a sudden, you don't hear much about regime change. He established deterrence, unfortunately. And Iran is saying if North Korea could do it and it preserved their regime, maybe we should go that same route. Once we become a nuclear power, no one can touch us. We've got deterrence, the ultimate deterrence. So I said, you'll see one of two things. Either Iran, God forbid, does exactly that and establishes nuclear deterrence and formally joins the nuclear club in 2025, or Israel strikes with or without the U.S., but certainly with U.S. support and a green light from the Trump administration. The third option, which I think is unlikely, is that Iran succumbs to the maximum pressure. Hey, the maximum pressure is going to work. It's going to cut off. The goal is to cut off all Iranian oil exports. And oil exports are the lifeblood of the Iranian economy. Without them, Iran's economy is going to collapse. The people who've revolted many times over the past 25, 26 years, that could be the tipping point for the regime if the economy completely collapses. And the administration may be counting on that, quite frankly. But if look, Iran's been pressured before, as has North Korea. And when tyrannical regimes, dictatorships are sanctioned, man, it hurts them. And the ultimate goal is that they collapse. But usually they're so demonic and evil. And here's the key point: they don't care about their own people. So North Korea, for instance, the people are starving, literally. Yet he's spending any money that he has on missiles and nukes and military hardware. And Iran does the same, sending billions to Hamas, Hezbollah, etc., to the Ring of Fire and towards their nuclear and ballistic missile programs and drone programs. So maximum pressure will work. It's going to hurt Iran badly. But that doesn't mean that Iran, which is so demonically, ideologically obsessed with having a nuclear weapon, is going to abandon that goal. So I find that option the least likely. The most likely, quite frankly, would be an Israeli strike with U.S. support. In the very least, a green light, do what you got to do, right on Israel, or maybe some kind of other support, refueling, mid-air refueling support, who knows? But folks, I think that's the most likely outcome here, and no one wants to see it, and Donald Trump doesn't want to see it. But he also realizes, look, I'm trying here. Trump can go before the world and say, hey, we tried. We tried. But they're a fanatical, demonic regime that was hell-bent on acquiring nuclear weapons. So we had to do what we had to do, or Israel had to do what it had to do, and we support that. And some have compared the Iranian nuclear crisis to the Cuban Missile Crisis in slow motion. I think that's a very apt comparison. This has been unfolding over the past, 30 years, the Iranian nuclear crisis. I think it's coming to a head, folks. Now that Donald Trump's in office and he's going to do great things with Bibi together like they did during their first term. The year of reckoning is here. By the way, a year of reckoning in a positive sense, perhaps, in terms of the Abraham Accords being revived and an Israeli normalization agreement with Saudi Arabia. Now, I know our viewers have varying takes on that. Bibi said today, and I quote, I'm pretty much quoting directly, I believe it's going to happen. That's the prime minister of Israel saying that. I believe it's going to happen. Peace with Saudi Arabia. And he said, look, if we had a few more months with Donald Trump in office, it would have happened already during the first term back in 2020, 2021. And I think you're going to see other nations come into the fold as well. Folks, I personally believe it's going to happen. And Trump said, look, because the big fear a lot of our viewers have, and I've had as well, is that is the price too steep for a Saudi normalization deal? Meaning, does that require a Palestinian state? Because that ain't good. And that's not something we want to see. And Trump, by the way, he was asked about that 4 or 5 years ago. He said, oh, yeah, maybe we'll give him a state. He was open to the idea. He basically said today, you know, things change. And so does my thinking. You're not hearing Trump talk about a Palestinian state. And he had said today that Saudi normalization with Israel would not require a Palestinian state, because there's a lot of concern that the Saudis were digging in their heels over that. Hey, we want to normalize with Israel, but only if there's a Palestinian state. Trump's saying, nah, you don't need it. You don't necessarily need that. That was refreshing to hear. That gave me certainly a more optimistic view. The least amount that Israel needs to give up to make that happen is the best possible outcome, quite frankly. And a Palestinian state, which after October, even obviously before October 7th, but after October 7th, I mean, this should not even be in the stratosphere of discussion. A new terror state on Israel's borders, no thanks. And now that Trump is saying, no, that's not a prerequisite for this to happen, I think it's going to encourage a lot of people. Okay, so we're keeping an eye on that. And look, folks, you could see that by the end of 2025. This could be a year of reckoning. Iran's nuclear program, Israel-Saudi peace, the Houthis will be reckoned with, I believe, this year. Syria, and watch Syria. That's a whole other conversation. They did not discuss that publicly, Bibi and Trump today, but I'm sure it came up behind closed doors because the leader of HTS, that radical jihadi group that is the main force in Damascus right now, was in Turkey. Mohammed al-Golani, meeting with Erdogan, the Turkish president, and other Turkish leaders. And there are rumblings that they may agree, Turkey and this new Muslim, radical, Turkey's Muslim Brotherhood linked, that government. The government in Syria is Al-Qaeda linked. A possible defense pact or some kind of formal alliance between Turkey and Syria. Folks, keep an eye on this. Keep an eye on this. That may bring Turkish troops into Syria on Israel's doorstep. And someone observed today, perhaps correctly, you know, in Syria in particular, it was emptied out of Iran and Hezbollah and Assad. And now you may be swapping in a new enemy in the form of Erdogan's Turkey. And it's sad because it wasn't like that before Erdogan. Before 2002, when he came to power, Turkey and Israel had a great relationship. But he is a radical Islamist, a Hamas supporter of the Muslim Brotherhood mold. And keep an eye on that. If he and this jihadist government in Syria come to a formal pact, not good news. And just when you think, wow, okay, we're taking care of the Iran axis and Iran nuclear program, all great, you may have the second largest military in NATO, that's Turkey, looming as the new threat at your doorstep in Syria. Again, not being a Debbie Downer, but we're keeping a close eye on that as well. And prophetic implications, Isaiah 17, the destruction of Damascus. Number 2, Ezekiel 38 and 39, Turkey coming against Israel along with Iran, along with most likely Russia coming from the north, that latter days confederation Ezekiel talks about. So the prophetic time clock right now is in overdrive. And could the Gaza relocation plan be part of that? A few more quick thoughts on that. And again, if you're just joining us, welcome. And the big headline, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, U.S. President Donald Trump met today, held a press conference in which Donald Trump said that the U.S. wants to control Gaza. Basically, we want to take control there. We want to ascend. It's rubble, a lot of it, thanks to Hamas. And by the way, something that needs to be said here. Yes, Hamas ruled Gaza with a wicked iron fist for years. Demonic Nazi organization. But folks, it must be said, the Palestinian people in Gaza in 2006 voted for Hamas. Not only that, poll after poll still shows that the majority of Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank, which is the biblical heartland of Judea and Samaria, still support Hamas, and they agree with what Hamas did on October 7th. Furthermore, on October 7th, when some 5,000, 3,000 Hamas jihadis invaded southern Israel, some 5,000 to 6,000 Palestinian civilians followed behind them and also wreaked havoc, raped, and pillaged. Those innocent Palestinian civilians we hear so much about by the mainstream media and Western diplomats. And you've seen the scenes of Israeli hostages being released over the past few weeks, and hordes and mobs of those, again, innocent Palestinian civilians surrounding them, calling for their death. So let's just tell it like it is when it comes to Gaza. And it's the brainwashing, the death cult that's taken root there. So that is land that has been desecrated time and time again by evil and terror. What Trump is suggesting, and look, he's a big vision, outside the box thinker. He's a businessman. He's a deal maker. He's a real estate magnate. That's how he made his claim to fame. He's saying, look, why not this? Why not? It's already leveled. Why not clean up Gaza, empty it, first of all, the key point, just relocate the Palestinians who live in Gaza to places like Egypt, Jordan, Muslim nations around the region. And then we get to the work of rebuilding it and making it an economic zone, thousands of jobs. He's got a vision there. Waterfront, he called it the Riviera. It could be the Riviera of Gaza. He's envisioning waterfront property. The guy's, he knows what he's doing. And obviously things, and he said this again and again today, it can't go back to what it was, Gaza. A terror hornet's nest. Every square inch of it's terror, tunnels underground, evil. It's done. Can't go back to how it was. So what's the solution? He's a problem solver. Start fresh. And people are saying right away, well, nation building. Trump's talking about, he's suggesting nation building. This isn't good. He said he opposed nation building in Iraq, especially Afghanistan. Very true. I think the crucial distinction here is what he's suggesting is very different than Iraq and Afghanistan in that U.S. soldiers, U.S. forces in Iraq and Afghanistan had to deal with an angry, hateful populace that was still very much there in their faces every day. And they were trying to bring democracy into two societies that have no experience with democracy and had no desire for it, by and large, of any kind of Western sense of what democracy is. What he's suggesting, on the other hand, in Gaza is not pacifying and trying to deprogram the local population and then rebuild and teach them democracy. No. What he's suggesting is literally emptying Gaza out. So there is no Palestinian radicalized population there. Emptying it out. And then starting afresh and rebuilding. So I think that's the crucial distinction when we talk about nation building. Trump opposed trying to bring democracy to places that had no desire for it, while your soldiers being sniped at and targeted every day by an angry, seething, radicalized local population. That local population would no longer live in Gaza under Trump's plan. Does everyone get that distinction? I think it's a crucial one, because some people were talking about that, and I said, well, this is different. Because you're not going to have a guerrilla warfare campaign against U.S. soldiers and U.S. contractors and builders who were there rebuilding Gaza. Does this require U.S.? A lot of questions here. Hey, folks, look. I'm intrigued, needless to say, of the plan, but we want more hard details. President Trump put it out there tonight. I'm sure more details will be forthcoming. He's going to discuss it more with Bibi. But U.S. military presence, is it needed? And again, if you don't have an angry local radicalized population taking shots at you every day, I feel a lot better about that. If there's literally not a population there, which is what Trump is suggesting, look, let's get them out of there. And he said it in very empathetic terms. Perhaps much more empathetic than the Palestinians in Gaza deserve, quite frankly, for the reasons I just laid out, that they have been supportive of Hamas and all the butchery. It's a brainwashed population and radicalized thoroughly. Nonetheless, President Trump said, look, let's give them a better life. Let's build nice neighborhoods for them in nice countries and get them out of Gaza because it's a nightmare there. I might add, a self-created nightmare. I can't stress that enough, but I digress. But okay, what's the U.S. military footprint there? What does it look like? Will other countries chip in? The Saudis, UAE? I'm certain that that's a plan, part of the plan. And more details, I'm sure, will be forthcoming. But folks, this is not an overnight thing. Let me just close with this. It won't be overnight. It can't be, because Hamas is still in Gaza. Newsflash. The strip is mostly rubble. For what Hamas did, Israel responded righteously and did what they had to do. Hamas is in its death throes in many ways. It's more of a ragtag guerrilla bunch right now, guerrilla warfare unit, but there's still thousands of jihadis there. About 20,000 have been killed already since October 7th. The leadership's been wiped out, largely, not all of it. But Hamas, as it was, it no longer has the rocket arsenal. The tunnels have been destroyed, many of them. It couldn't mount an invasion of southern Israel like it did on October 7th. Those days are over. And Bibi and Trump agreed in public tonight to complete that, to complete the elimination of Hamas, the utter destruction of this demonic death cult once and for all. You can't talk about depopulating Gaza and revitalizing it, creating an economic zone there until Hamas is destroyed. And before that can happen, the goal is to get the hostages out as well. So get the hostages out, destroy Hamas, and then let's see what happens with Gaza. But certainly Donald Trump got the world talking once again tonight. And with the hostage plan, phase 2 is coming soon. We shall see. I think there's 79 hostages still in Gaza, some dead, some alive. And it's been a heavy price for Israel to pay, a heavy price. I mean, releasing Palestinian terrorists, hundreds upon hundreds. We've discussed it here in the live stream. But so this is an incremental type thing, folks, bit by bit. Let's see what happens here. Get the hostages out, first things first, destroy Hamas, and then it looks like some very interesting things may happen in Gaza and beyond in the region. And guess what? We'll have a front row seat for you here on the Watchman Newscast live stream, breaking it all down for you. So glad you're here with us. What a night. What a day. Wow. More to come tomorrow. In the meantime, have a great night. God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace.
Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload, and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. And don't forget to share your thoughts, insights, and comments below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.